Scene opens with intense, dramatic music. A montage of Stephanie White's press conferences, her fierce expressions, and quick cuts of Caitlin Clark's game-winning shots. The screen flashes with bold text. She finally spoke. The basketball world has been waiting for silence to break, waiting for the tension to crack, waiting for Stephanie White, the stoic, unshakable, fiercely protective coach of Caitlin Clark, to finally say what everyone knew was coming. And now she has. But what she said, it wasn't what anyone expected. It wasn't a generic compliment. It wasn't a diplomatic statement. It wasn't the polished, PR-approved nonsense that coaches usually feed the media. No, Stephanie White sent a message. A powerful, unfiltered, no-holds-barred message about Caitlin Clark, her talent, her future, her critics, and her place in basketball history. And Yanni, when Stephanie White talks about Caitlin Clark, the world listens. Because this isn't just a coach praising her player. This is a mentor defending her legacy. This is a woman who has seen Caitlin at her lowest, crippled by doubt, broken by injury, drowning in the pressure of being the face of women's basketball, and watched her rise like a phoenix from the ashes. And now, Stephanie White is firing back at every critic, every hater, every skeptic who dared to write Caitlin Clark off. What did she say? Why did she say it? And what does this mean for the future of Caitlin Clark's career? Buckle up, Yanni, because this message is about to shake the entire sports world to its core. The press conference that broke the internet. Scene opens with a packed press room. Cameras flash. Reporters lean forward in their seats. Stephanie White walks in, her expression unreadable. She sits down, adjusts the microphone, and takes a deep breath. It was a regular Tuesday afternoon. The team had just finished a morning practice. No major games were scheduled for another 4 days. There was no reason to expect anything extraordinary. But then the press release dropped. Coach Stephanie White will address the media at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time regarding recent comments made about Caitlin Clark. Within minutes, the internet went into overdrive. What comments? Who made them? Was Caitlin Clark in trouble? Was there a feud? Was Stephanie White leaving? Speculation ran wild. Social media exploded with theories. Some claimed that a rival coach had insulted Caitlin Clark. Others whispered that a sports commentator had questioned Clark's ability to return to elite form. A few even suggested that Stephanie White was preparing to announce her resignation. None of it was true, but the anticipation was palpable. At exactly 2 p.m., Stephanie White walked into the press room. She wore a plain black blazer. No jewelry, no smile. Her eyes were fixed, her jaw was set, and her posture radiated a quiet, unshakable confidence. She didn't wait for questions. She leaned into the microphone and said, "I'm going to say this once, and I'm not going to repeat it." The room fell silent. I've been coaching basketball for over 2 decades. I've coached Hall of Famers. I've coached Olympians. I've coached players who went on to become legends of the game. And I've never, not once, seen a player like Caitlin Clark. She paused. Reporters held their breath. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to address the disrespect, the cheap shots, the whispers, the cowardly comments from people who have never played this game at a high level, but feel entitled to tear down a young woman who has given everything to this sport. Her voice didn't raise. It didn't crack. It was calm, controlled, and absolutely devastating. I've heard people say she's overrated. I've heard people say she's too emotional. I've heard people say she can't handle the pressure. And I've heard people say that her injury was karma for being too arrogant. Stephanie White leaned forward, her eyes burning with intensity. Let me be very clear. Caitlin Clark is the most talented, hardest-working, and mentally toughest player I have ever coached. And anyone who says otherwise, they don't know basketball. They don't know her. And they certainly don't know me. The press room erupted into a frenzy of questions. Hands shot up, voices overlapped. But Stephanie White raised her hand, silencing them all. "I'm not taking questions today. I'm just sending a message. And the message is this: you can doubt her. You can criticize her. You can even hate her. But you will never, ever break her. Because she's not just a great player. She's a great person. And that's something that no amount of hatred can ever take away." She stood up, adjusted her blazer, and walked out. The room sat in stunned silence. Within minutes, the video went viral. Clips of the press conference were shared millions of times. Sports commentators dissected every word. Fans flooded social media with support. Critics scrambled to backtrack. And Caitlin Clark? She was watching it all from her apartment, tears streaming down her face. Because Stephanie White had just done something that no coach had ever done for her before. She had publicly, passionately, and unapologetically defended her, not as a player, but as a human being. And the world would never forget it. Who was Stephanie White talking about? Scene opens with a montage of controversial sports commentators, anonymous social media posts, and screenshots of critical articles about Caitlin Clark. Everyone wanted to know, who was Stephanie White talking about? She hadn't named names. She hadn't pointed fingers. But her message was so specific, so pointed, that the internet immediately began playing detective. Within hours, a list of suspects emerged. Suspect 1. A prominent male sports analyst who had publicly stated that Caitlin Clark's injury was a wake-up call and that she needed to learn humility. His comments had gone viral weeks earlier, sparking outrage among fans. He later tried to clarify his remarks, but the damage was already done. Suspect 2. A rival WNBA coach who had been quoted in a local newspaper saying that Caitlin Clark's playing style was reckless and that she wouldn't last long in this league. The coach later denied making the comments, but reporters had the recording. Suspect 3. An anonymous social media account with thousands of followers that had been relentlessly trolling Caitlin Clark for months, mocking her injury, calling her overrated, and even making personal attacks about her appearance. Suspect 4. A former player-turned-commentator who had suggested that Caitlin Clark's success was more about hype than talent, and that she was benefiting from a weak era of women's basketball. None of these individuals were ever officially confirmed by Stephanie White or Caitlin Clark. But it didn't matter, because Stephanie White's message wasn't really about any one person. It was about a culture of disrespect, a culture of tearing down successful women, a culture of dismissing greatness because it makes people uncomfortable. By the days following the press conference, fans and journalists alike praised Stephanie White for taking a stand. Many called it a defining moment for women's basketball. Others said it was long overdue. But there were also critics. Some accused Stephanie White of being too defensive and overprotective. Others argued that she was creating unnecessary drama and that she should focus on coaching, not fighting battles. Stephanie White didn't respond to any of it because she didn't need to. Her message had been heard, and her player, Caitlin Clark, had never felt more supported in her entire life. Caitlin Clark's response: silence that screamed. Scene opens with Caitlin Clark sitting alone in a quiet room, staring at her phone, watching Stephanie White's press conference on a loop. Her eyes are red, but she's smiling. Caitlin Clark didn't hold a press conference. She didn't tweet a response. She didn't give any interviews. She stayed completely silent. And in that silence, she said everything. Because those who know Caitlin Clark, who truly know her, understand that she doesn't need to shout to be heard. Her silence was a statement, a declaration, a testament to the bond she shares with Stephanie White. But behind the scenes, Caitlin Clark was deeply affected. According to sources close to the player, Caitlin watched Stephanie's press conference at least a dozen times. She cried each time, not because she was sad, but because she was overwhelmed by the love and loyalty her coach had shown her. In a private conversation with a teammate, Caitlin said, "I've had people doubt me my whole life, but nobody has ever stood up for me like that. Not like she did. That's not just a coach. That's family." The next day, Caitlin walked into practice with a new energy. She was more focused, more determined, more unstoppable than ever. She didn't say a word about the press conference to the media, but her game spoke volumes. In the next 3 games, Caitlin Clark averaged 37 points, 11 assists, and 9 rebounds. She hit game winners. She broke records. She silenced critics. And every time she made a big play, she looked over at Stephanie White and nodded. It was their silent language, a language built on mutual respect, unwavering trust, and an unbreakable bond. But the story doesn't end there. Because Stephanie White's message didn't just affect Caitlin Clark. It affected the entire team, the entire league, the entire sport. Players from rival teams reached out to Stephanie White to thank her for speaking out. Young athletes sent her messages of gratitude. Parents of aspiring players shared the video with their daughters, saying, "See, this is what a real coach looks like." Stephanie White had become more than a coach. She had become a symbol of standing up for what's right, a symbol of protecting your players, a symbol of refusing to let the world tear down the people you love. And in a world where athletes are often treated as commodities, Stephanie White reminded everyone that behind every great player is a great human being, and sometimes that human being just needs someone to fight for them. The backlash. Stephanie White faces the critics. Scene opens with TV screens showing debate panels, angry tweets, and headlines like, "Coach White under fire. Was she out of line?" and "Too emotional for the NBA." Not everyone was impressed by Stephanie White's message. In fact, the backlash was swift and brutal. Sports pundits, many of whom had built their careers on contrarian takes, wasted no time in criticizing the coach. One commentator said, "Stephanie White is supposed to be a professional. That press conference was unprofessional. You don't air your grievances like that in public. It makes the league look bad." Another wrote, "She's coddling Caitlin Clark. Players need to be tough. You can't shield them from criticism. That's not how you build champions." A third even suggested, "If Stephanie White can't handle the heat, maybe she shouldn't be coaching at this level. This isn't high school. This is the big leagues." Social media was even more unforgiving. Some accused Stephanie White of playing the victim. Others called her attention-seeking. A few even implied that she had ulterior motives, suggesting she was using Caitlin Clark to advance her own career. The trolls came out in full force. But Stephanie White didn't retreat. She didn't apologize. She didn't clarify. She didn't explain herself. Because she knew that no matter what she said, the critics would find something to criticize. Instead, she let her team's performance do the talking. And the team delivered. In the weeks following the controversy, the team won 12 consecutive games. They dominated opponents. They broke records. They became the most talked-about team in the league. And Caitlin Clark? She played the best basketball of her career. Every time a critic opened their mouth, Caitlin Clark responded with a triple-double. Every time a pundit doubted her, she hit a career high. Every time someone questioned her coach, she dedicated a game-winning shot to Stephanie White. It was poetic justice. And slowly, the backlash began to fade. Even the most vocal critics had to admit, whatever Stephanie White was doing, it was working. What Stephanie White's message really means for the future. Scene opens with a wide shot of a basketball court, empty and quiet. A single ball sits at center court. The camera slowly zooms in. Stephanie White's message wasn't just about Caitlin Clark. It was about something much bigger. It was about the future of women's sports. It was about the respect that female athletes deserve, but rarely receive. It was about the double standards that female coaches face, where being passionate is labeled emotional, and being protective is labeled unprofessional. Stephanie White sent a message that transcended basketball. She said, "I will not be silent. I will not stand by while my player is torn apart, and I will not let the world define her by anything other than her greatness." That message resonated far beyond the WNBA. Young girls across the country watched that press conference and saw a woman who refused to back down. A woman who stood up for her player with unwavering conviction. A woman who proved that strength isn't about being emotionless, it's about being fearless. And Caitlin Clark? She's no longer just a basketball player. She's a symbol of resilience, a symbol of hope, a symbol of what happens when you refuse to let the world break you. Together, Stephanie White and Caitlin Clark are redefining what it means to be a champion. Because a champion isn't just someone who wins games. A champion is someone who fights for what's right, even when the world is against them. And that, Yanni, is exactly what Stephanie White did. She sent a strong message about Caitlin Clark. But she also sent a strong message to the entire world. We are here. We are unstoppable. And we are just getting started.